Welcome to the October 2020 InRange Patreon supporter Q&A. All of these questions here are provided to us via Patreon supporters, and I would like to remind everyone watching this that InRange is completely supported only by Patreon supporters, and there is no financial supporting for InRange outside of that. No sponsors, no advertising money, completely demonetized on YouTube intentionally. We don't get any financial support from YouTube Red either. The only thing that keeps InRange alive are Patreon supporters. And at a certain dollar level and above, $5 and above, you get to submit questions for each monthly Q&A, of which we have hundreds of every month. So we can't do them all, but I ask people to tell me if they've asked the question before, and at that point I attempt to get to it at some point in time. So let's go ahead and get started, because I have a lot of them today. I decided to stand up for this one to keep the energy levels up, considering how many questions are actually on this list. Gorm, 6.5 Creedmoor or 308 in a modern sporting rifle platform. Well, there's a lot of cartridges out there, and it depends on what you want to use your sporting rifle for. The term sporting rifle can mean lots of things to lots of people. When I hear that, for some reason I think of hunting, not sure why, but it could also be for some precision long-range work or something like that. And in my opinion, and I know that this is a controversial one, 308 is essentially obsolescent at this point. I mean, it is a cartridge that has done a great job and can do a great job. You can also do a great job with 4570 for that matter, but the reality is 6.5 Creedmoor and cartridges in that general caliber size are far more efficient from a ballistic coefficient perspective and the ability to reach out further with less wind drift. So in that opinion, in my opinion, I would recommend 6.5 Creedmoor. Bourbon. Any advice on my first lever gun for cowboy action 1880 division? 45 Colt or 4440? Well, this is something I've said a lot, and I know you're picking two historically correct cartridges here, sort of. 45 Colt was not historically correct for a lever gun at that period in time, because at that time they used something called balloon head cartridges, and the rim of a 45 Colt was insufficient for purchase for an extractor in any of the lever guns of the time. So 45 Colt being a lever gun is a more modern incarnation, even though it is a historically correct cartridge from 1873. So is 4440. That's from 1873, and that was the cartridge designed for lever guns. So if you're looking for historicity, you would go with 4440. The reality is 45 Colt versus 4440 ballistically make no difference, and you're probably going to want to hand load each of them anyway because they're too expensive to buy on the open market regardless. So in this regard, if you're looking for just shooting, I'm going to recommend the same thing I recommend all the time, which is an 1873 chambered in 357 Magnum. You get a ballistic capability that's better than both 45 Colt and 4440 in terms of a flatter shooting cartridge, and it's easier to load, deal with, etc. If you're looking for a cartridge that's historically based, or you want to essentially have historical type ballistics, then 45 Colt or 4440 will both do the job. And regardless of what people like to tell you, 45 Colt works fine with black powder. You don't need that special sealing case in the 4440, in my opinion. And 45 Colt is much easier to deal with from components perspective, as well as reloading over and over again. 4440 tends to break, and the cartridges are quite fragile, or I should say the cases. So if you're going to go only between 45 Colt and 4440, I recommend 45 Colt. If you're going for ultimate historical accuracy, go for 4440. But if you want something that's easiest across the board and you still want to have a gun that's from that period of time, I recommend an 1873 in 357 Magnum. Tim B. I recently moved to the desert. What are some of your must-haves for surviving the heat? Water, hat, a light hat. Something that's, they don't have to look good, they have to fit right. So one of those kind of like super lightweight material hats, that makes a big difference. A wicking type shirt that goes to arm length or covers as much as your body as possible. We're in an interesting cold snap right now. We went from extremely oppressive heat to actually it's chilly out here right now. And that's the desert. So that's why I'm able to wear this amazing attire for you all today. But that said, when it comes to the desert, you must-haves are, of course, water. A hat, a good hat with a very long, big brim. Doesn't matter if it looks silly or not. The bigger the brim, the better in terms of providing you shade. And then wicking material type shirts and clothing that covers as much of your body as possible, because you don't want the UVs hitting your skin. That actually is a part of what really gets to you in the desert beyond just the heat. So I would recommend that kind of thing, and those wicking shirts do a great job. Patrick W. Do you have any plans to use the 1876 Winchester in a match? Yes, and in fact we already tried to do that once, but it was a day that was plagued with problems. Every once in a while, when you want to go film something, stuff just goes wrong. And that was one of those days, and this was quite a while ago now, and we haven't revisited it. And getting enough cartridges together to shoot the match is a challenge. So what happened is we went out and filmed it, had all sorts of audio issues, some other things went wrong. There was cartridge issues that I hadn't quite reloaded properly, which I've now been able to fix, and all of that all went wrong on the same day. And so we filmed something and can't use it, so it has to be revisited, but that means that I have to make all the cartridges again to get to the point to be able to do it again. Will I be doing it? Yes. I don't know what time it will be done, but it will happen. Tim K. Repeat question. Should stages have multiple sets of targets to force competitors to focus on target identification and mental agility? I think that there's reasons to have multiple targets for lots of different reasons. Frequently at two-gun matches, we'll have more than one target out there and require, for example, not double taps, but single hits on each, but more than 2 hits on each. So you have to, each target has to be hit 4 times, but with no double taps. That means you can't just go tat, 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 tat. You have to actually go tat, 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 and you have to switch. And I think the idea of transitioning between targets and getting a sight acquisition each time is a good thing. In terms of target identification, that's also a valuable thing if you can do it. That's a little bit hard to implement because you need to do things at the beginning of the stage frequently that somehow modify the stage per shooter so that they have to identify the right target to shoot. If you saw Desert Brutality 2019? Yeah, 2019. We had that kind of thing going on where there was actually a math thing going on, which you have to do mathematics on the clock to determine which targets were divisible by the number you acquired at the beginning of the stage. And that meant that you didn't going into the stage, you didn't necessarily know what targets you were going to be engaging until you flipped the card at the beginning. So that kind of stuff has a lot of merit, and I think including things like mental agility challenges as well as physical challenges are a big deal. And something that we see a lot in competition is just time-based scoring with no real consideration besides how fast can you hit targets from 3 different or 4 different locations. And that's a valuable skill, but if you inject mental agility and physical agility and all those things into the same thing, I think you're getting more out of the same course of fire or the amount of time spent on a course of fire than you do when it's just merely a shooting challenge. Nyrom. Is there any type of content besides cartridge production and gun modifications manufacturing that you can't do due to restrictions on YouTube? Well, technically, the restrictions require that you can't demonstrate magazines larger than 30 rounds. I know lots of people do this stuff on YouTube, but they're playing with fire because the reality is if their channel gets attention from the overlords and they're violating the policies, guess what happens? Blammo, channel gono. So the reason I am complying, or should say having a cooling effect on what I'm putting on YouTube based on those policies, is because I don't want that to happen. And the reality is it's also an opportunity for me to encourage people to go look at other venues besides YouTube. So recently there was a Blunderbuss video where I showed how to drill vent holes if you acquired one of the reproduction ones. And of course the introduction was on YouTube, but the real content was on multiple distribution networks besides YouTube that don't censor us. Facebook, BitChute, Vimeo, now Utreon. And we're seeing more and more. And I'm going to do a lot more of that on InRange. Some of that's going to be paper cartridge manufacturing. Some of that might be reloading. But some of it might be magazines of higher capacity than 30 rounds. The reality is, though, when I do that, I'm doing that for people that support InRange and dedicated viewers, because the casual viewer will not go to those other distribution networks to watch the content. I look at the views for the most recent Blunderbuss video, and the views are quite good in aggregate. If you add up how many people watched on Vimeo versus Utreon versus BitChute versus Facebook and add it together, it's a good number. But it's still not the same number that if the video had just been on YouTube. It is what it is. That doesn't mean I'm not going to stop. And I think we need to diversify where we watch our content because YouTube is getting, well, as we know, the social oligarchy is a problem in general. And the next question's right on point for that. 1x4x9. What are your thoughts on the docudrama The Social Dilemma? Well, I happen to know what this is because I watched it. It's on Netflix. If you guys haven't watched it, I would recommend you check it out. It's a little bit overly dramatic and a little bit weird and cringy at times, but it brings up an interesting topic in that they interview a number of people that were early producers or creators of platforms like Facebook and Instagram and others. And the insidiousness of what social media is doing to us and society as a whole is something that's almost hard to fathom. And while there are really positive things that have come out of it, for example, the ability to have a channel like this is a really great thing, the ability to create a community and stay in contact with your friends is a really great thing. But if you happen to watch some content that is, let's say, a conspiracy theory based completely in false narratives, the algorithm, the God algorithm, will suddenly start producing more of that for you, and we find that social media is strangely creating more echo chambers than breaking them. And we see that with gun content creators as well. Really, I know InRange tends to buck the trend of being different and sometimes pays the price for that, but a lot of people don't necessarily want to buck the trend even if they are, because they're now finding themselves in adversity, not only against the algorithm, which happens when you're just creating gun content, but against some of the community as a whole, who will find every possible way to try and tear you down for not conforming to the sheep herd mentality. Well, and the algorithm and engagement, as they say in the social media world, changes what is essentially provided to you via recommended viewing and recommended links. And so in that regard, this idea of echo chambers being formed, bad, really dangerous concepts being propagated and sent to people who are vulnerable to such things, is something that social media is doing, and they're doing it for profit because you're the product, not the content. And The Social Dilemma is a worthwhile documentary, and I would recommend watching it if you have Netflix. Yes, it's windy out here. ASDF. What kind of hearing eye protection do you use? Most of the time, much simpler than you would think. Eye protection is typically just standard clear or yellow shooting glasses that I get at Sportsman's Warehouse for around 20 bucks. If you spend more than that, I don't want to, because the reality is I am going to scratch them and I have to replace them with some regularity. And for hearing protection, I just get little orange squishies in bulk bags, the 32 decibel reduction ones, smush them up and stick them in my ears. I hate over-the-head hearing protection because I always knock them off during courses of fire. And when I stick the squishies in, I don't have to worry about them falling out or falling off during a course of fire. I know Ian gets some of the like special form-fitted ones that go in his ear. I just get the squishies and stick them in. William L. What old West Sider town has become a repeat visit for you? Or do you tend to move to other sites once you visited them? It's a mixture of both. Some of them capture my imagination or interest more than others. I tend to want to see new ones once I've seen one, but there are some that keep coming back to me, and mostly that tends to be cemeteries, quite honestly. And there is a cemetery here in Arizona near the San Pedro River for the old ghost town of Fairbank, and that cemetery, I have been going there for over, gosh, almost 20 years, and I have pictures of it slowly degrading over time. It's on a hill, parts of it are sliding off the hill. Really neat story about one of the graves there is for a woman that passed away. I believe it was in 1909, named Matilda Nelson. Took a picture of her grave, or maybe it was 1899. I don't remember off the top of my head. I think it was 1899, excuse me. I took a picture of her grave and started just Googling on the internet because I was curious about people that lived there and the names of the people in these graveyards. And came to find a family genealogy site in which someone mentioned that their grandmother died and they gave the location as Fairbank, Arizona. They had never seen her grave before, and they had the date wrong. So I was able to send them a picture of this grave going, here's a picture of your great-grandmother's grave, and here's the actual date she died on. That was just a really cool thing. But there's something about watching that cemetery slowly degrade. I have pictures of a lot of these old crosses when they still had the name visible on them, and they don't anymore, or they're not even standing anymore. So I kind of keep going back and just watching this slow state of decay, and it's fascinating, and it reminds us of our place in the world. So that's one I go back to a lot. K.D. Campbell. If you could spend a week in any American city or region that you've not visited before, where would you go and why? Would it be for content or contentment? Well, ultimately, it's nice to combine both. And the reality is there's so much history and interesting things in our world that that's not that impossible thing to do. When it comes down to it, where I would really like to spend some extra time would be the Caribbean. And yeah, I know we think of that as not being American, but, well, Puerto Rico, example, is a protectorate thereof. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in Puerto Rico that I'd like to cover, but I'd also like to hit other parts of the Caribbean as well. Other areas that I haven't been to yet is the Battle of the Greasy Grass, otherwise known as the Battle of Little Bighorn. That's a big one for me. Up to Deadwood, which I'm sure is a terrible tourist trap, but I want to see it anyway. And those are the ones that really pop in my mind right off the bat. Noel R. At what point should a gun owner pursue a CCW license? I can't answer that for you. I would ask At what point do you want to carry a firearm for personal defense reasons? Because that's the reason to have a CCW. Now, one could acquire a CCW for the perspective of wanting to have the training that comes with it. And by the way, here in Arizona, you don't need a permit to carry a concealed weapon as long as you're not a prohibited possessor. And frankly, I think that's the way it should be, in my opinion, because these types of CCW licenses and laws tend to affect different parts of our community than they think they will. The idea is that it's there to stop bad people from carrying a weapon, but the reality is frequently it's used to restrict people we just don't want or like to carry weapons. And when I say we, I don't mean me, I mean the system. And so, but that said, you may live in a place that requires a license. So I think the question should be, at what point should a gun owner pursue carrying a firearm for concealed carry if they require a license to get one? And I would say when you feel that you need to, or that it would be comfortable to you, but you're also willing to take on the responsibility that that comes with. And that responsibility is to always de-escalate. That responsibility is to be well trained with that firearm you're carrying. That responsibility is to have medical training to be able to help people around you and hopefully never have to use that gun. That responsibility is to understand that you're not suddenly some superhuman because you have a gun that's going to stop all evil from being around you. And the reality is the world's not quite as evil as we think it is anyway, and the idea that you actually need one is, I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we should not be able to carry a weapon, but the statistical reality is hopefully you'll never need one. So I have to say that this is a personal choice, and it's one that I can't answer for you, but all of those check boxes should be checked before you get to the point of doing that. Responsibility, de-escalation, training, medical. Christian S. Do you believe that the KP-15 lower, which he's calling the What Would Stoner Do lower, that's not exactly true, right? The What Would Stoner Do project is a component, lots of components thereof, and the KP-15 polymer monolithic lower is an integral part of the What Would Stoner Do rifle, but the KP-15 is in and of itself not a What Would Stoner Do branded thing. But anyways, do you believe that the KP-15 lower will be the new standard for AR-15 lowers? No, I don't. The reason I say that isn't because I don't have faith in the product and that I think that it couldn't be. I think that we are going to be fighting 50 years plus of bucking a trend, right? And on top of that, there's been a whole bunch of polymer lowers that were garbage on the market. And this one is designed to not be garbage, and it won't be. It's amazing. It's coming along in an incredible way. It's surpassing all my expectations. But will it be the new standard? No, it won't, because we have to defy the commonly known, we have to defy the common knowledge in getting that to happen. And maybe that could happen with enough time, but frankly, I find that common knowledge frequently isn't common nor knowledge. So will that happen? No. Will it be something that a lot of people will embrace and hopefully take on as their standard? Yes. Will it be the standard for the industry? Probably not. Kurosawa W7. Would there be any advantage to having a gun with an electronic bolt, as in not using a firing pin to set off the primer, but using an electric charge to ignite the primer or propellant? This has been done. Remington had a product like this. It does reduce your lock time at the cost of having proprietary components. On top of that, the ATF has weirdness around it because since it is electronically fired, you can essentially hack the electronics, and then the idea of can this be converted to be fully automatic, and it keeps going down the track. The speed of lock time in a modern gun, mechanically fired via striker or whatever, is so good when it's tuned well that the advantage you get from an electrically or electronically fired cartridge is so minimal that it doesn't matter that much. So is there an advantage? Yes. Is it one that we need to worry about or try to develop? Probably not. Hunter K. Do you have any stories of odd or unexplained firearm malfunctions you've experienced? I sure do. It's with an AK. And this has nothing to do with any sort of bias. Let me tell you this. But I've had this happen. I've seen it happen with 2 AKs, and it was weird to say the least. Somehow a fired, spent cartridge case got behind the bolt carrier. So you've got the AK receiver, the dust cover on top, the bolt carrier, and the spring behind it. And somehow the fired case got behind the bolt carrier group, between the dust cover and the receiver, and got stuck in there. And you have to pull the dust cover off and unjam this really crammed in cartridge case. I've seen it happen twice on 2 different AKs. I don't know if I'm the freaking lightning bolt that caused it. I don't understand it. Bizarre to say the least, and it is the most inexplicable malfunction I've ever seen. And the fact that I've seen it twice, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know how in the world the cartridge case got in that, where it got from here to there in the cycle. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I don't know that it ever will. Joshua C. Third time. Sorry. Why does it seem Europe was quicker to adopt semi-automatic pistols for civilian carry while the US stuck with revolvers for a much longer time? I don't know that that's the case, and I don't know that I have a great answer for this, to be honest. This is a historical question that would require deep delving, but there were lots of revolvers in Europe as well. That said, America had more of a firearms culture, and there was probably more, still does, right? To a degree. I mean, I understand that Europeans have guns. I'm not saying that. But in the United States, we had the frontier, and we had people carrying guns, and we had all that going on here in a way that was different than Europe. And that kind of all happened during the age of the revolver. And this to me feels like inertia, in that everyone already had what they needed or wanted, and these newfangled semi-auto things didn't necessarily address a problem that that a lot of people felt they needed to deal with. In fact, in one of my videos here, I've talked about how people didn't even modernize their percussion or cap and ball revolvers when cartridge revolvers came out. They stuck with a percussion revolver into the 1930s, right? So in that regard, I don't think that... I think there was just a large installed user base. This would be like saying, why are we still on Windows? But, well, Windows sucks, but everyone's got Windows, so here we are with Windows. Revolvers didn't suck, but everyone's got one that already wanted a gun, so why do we need a newfangled semi-automatic thingamajig? In my opinion, that's a guess. It's completely a guess, but that's my thought. Kyle P. What challenge would you like to see two-gun competition shooting overcome next? Mandatory taking of color concealment, a way to remove the 180, better moving targets. You're actually answering your question for yourself. It would be great to do cover and concealment. It's impossible to do in a match environment. That's a training thing. Removing the 180 is splendid, and if we could do that more, that would be even better. Blind stages would be my favorite thing to do, because then you don't go into this with any idea or inclination about what you're facing, and you have to solve it on the clock. Really hard to run in a match, but super cool, and moving targets would be splendid. I also would like to see targets that get neutralized with random engagement. What I mean by that is, I can't tell you that you neutralize this target with 2 rounds or 4 rounds or 3 or 1. I would like the target to determine when it's neutralized by some methodology, or maybe even randomization, so that when you as the person engage in the target, you can't just expect to hit it twice and call it a good. You have to do that until it's neutralized, and I think that would be a real interesting dynamic. So those are things I'd like to see. All of them very, very hard to do. Timothy L. Longtime viewer, first-time subscriber. Thank you, Timothy, and welcome. I know you've talked about problems with caseless ammunition and auto-loading firearms in the past, heat buildup, difficulty clearing malfunctions, etc. Do you think there could be a niche application for caseless ammunition in revolvers, since each chamber gets several rounds of rest, in quotes, before being loaded with another round? It could allow for more time for heat dispersal and clearing a malfunction, dud, or squib that could be done without disassembling the firearm completely. Well, we sort of saw this, and this isn't truly caseless, but if you've ever seen the Tround revolver, it's kind of in that realm. The Trounds are somewhere in that direction. Would caseless ammunition work better in revolvers as a mechanical discussion? And that's an interesting thing I never thought about, because you're taking something that's really considered a very modern concept of caseless ammunition, and I'm putting it into a more antiquated firearms design, right? So I don't think we've seen a lot of people address that, because that's weird. It's mixing ice cream and ketchup. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. But mechanically speaking, from just the perspective of would that be a better way to use caseless ammunition, I gotta say it probably would. The thing is there are value in doing it, and probably not. The reality is, with a modern revolver, open up the cylinder, pop, all those cartridges or cases fall right out, or even a Schofield all the way back into the 1870s. So the need for this is questionable, although it's an interesting gee whiz idea. Jake M. I was wondering if a demonetized video still receives revenue from YouTube Premium subscriptions. Also, what are your thoughts on YouTube Premium from a content creator perspective? No, InRange receives no financial support from InRange or from YouTube at all. You're on YouTube Premium, YouTube Red, you're paying YouTube so you don't have ads. All of InRange's videos are proactively demonetized. We don't even have an AdSense account, which means we cannot receive money from YouTube no matter if money went into the account. That said, because all of the videos are demonetized proactively by me, that also demonetizes money from Premium and Red. So there is no money getting to InRange from YouTube views whatsoever at all, period, the end. What are my thoughts on YouTube Premium from a content creator perspective? I don't really have one. I'm not a fan of, this isn't a paywall, so it's not really that, but I'm not a fan of paywalls. I think content should be put out there, and people should support it if they like the content that's being created. And the only way that they're going to know if they want that or like that is to be able to see it. As well as there's value in sometimes people that can't support a content creator for whatever reason they are in life. Maybe they don't have the resources, the financials, the time. But that doesn't mean they should be excluded from what should be, I know we all don't agree about my content being valuable, but being valuable content, or at least entertainment even. So that means that the people that are willing or able, or both, to step up and support a content creator means they're kind of supporting the load for others as well that maybe not be able to. And I think that's a valuable thing too. Chris D. Would you rather be issued an L85 in 1987, an M14 in 1965, a Moisen Nagant in 1944, or a Trapped Air Springfield in 1890? I talk a lot of crap about the M14, but out of these options, I would go with the M14. The M14 is it's viable. It's just a kludgy gun, and I don't think it's much of an upgrade, if at all, an upgrade from the M1 Garand. But when you compare the L85 in that time, the M14 in that time, a Moisen Nagant in that time, and the Springfield in that time, I'm going to go with the M14. Red Army Reenactor. I remember in an old video you talked about the insecurity of Touch ID. It seems to me Face ID is even worse. Is there a way to beat it? Should your phone be in the hands of some government agency? Well, one way to beat it is to not use it. You don't use biometrics, they can't use that against you. However, if your device gets out of your control when you're dealing with a government agency, Face ID is something that really has no legal precedent, that they couldn't just click and point it at you, and the reality is it's going to authenticate. This is different than being coerced or forced to provide your fingerprint onto a fingerprint reader, which we know has some precedent, but it can still happen. So that said, biometrics in general, if you're worried about government agencies, is a bad idea. If you think you're going to a place where you're worried about that type of biometric authentication and you are using it, turn it off before you go there. There is an emergency mode on a lot of devices where if you click so many numbers of times or whatever, it will disable the device. That's another option. But proactive, you have to know that you need to do that before it gets into their hands. But in terms of defenses against Face ID being used against you should your device get out of your control, that's a problem. And they're going to be able to unlock the device by merely pointing it at you. So I would keep that in mind. Ryan A. Any chance for an XCR mud test in the future? Yes, I have an XCR. It is a 308 one, but I will do that at some point. Philip W. Can you share your recipe for hollandaise sauce? Yes, I can. I'm not going to do it here on this video, but I will post it for you on Facebook and Patreon per your request. So bear with me on that one. Gory the All-Powerful. You said before that you're a fan of System Shock. Oh man, I'm more than a fan. That's my favorite thing ever. I like System Shock even better than I like the Aliens universe. System Shock 1 and 2 are quintessentially mind-shaping things to me. They are amazing. What are your feelings on the remake that's coming out eventually? Big fan, been watching the progress on this, and I super duper hope that it actually gets released, because taking the original System Shock and allowing some of us that have enjoyed it from the past to re-enjoy it with that modernized aesthetic and graphics is amazing. But also bringing System Shock, which I believe is one of the most important entertainment, cyberpunk, really intelligent games ever created to a new audience because it's been modernized, is also valuable. So I am crazy excited about that, and I am hoping so much that it actually happens. Jared L. Third time asking. Sorry about that. Do you still plan on giving some What Would Stoner Do 2020 rifles to some, quote, real world people, quote, or maybe even other YouTube influencers? No. And you know what? This got clarified recently for me. Here's what we are going to do with the What Would Stoner Do 2020. When that stuff's released, we have a lot of pre-orders coming, which is great. And by the way, for those of you that don't understand this, InRange does get a small amount of every What Would Stoner Do 2020 rifle sold, the complete gun. InRange makes no financials off of the KP-15 lower, only the complete gun, purchased through Brownells. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to solicit the world to provide us reviews of the gun from them. So I'd rather kind of crowdsource this, and we will release the good and the bad as long as you're doing it with honesty and diligence. If you have a real problem, we'll release it. If you have benefits and love the gun, we'll release it. If you're just an asshat and want to make trouble, probably won't. But we're going to be honest about it. The reason I don't want to do this and this YouTube influencer thing is maybe you haven't looked, or maybe you haven't seen, or maybe you haven't noticed. But there's a lot of stuff going on in that world that I don't know that we can trust from the perspective of a fair review. First of all, advertising money and monetization is a dangerous and insidious thing. Sponsorship and support is a dangerous thing. And the other thing is, there was something that came out recently called the Leviathan Group. You might want to look it up. A surprising amount of content creators all under the same marketing social media driver. Whether or not that has influence on the legitimacy of their reviews, I don't know, but it certainly puts them into question, and I see no reason to provide them one of these rifles for them to influence upon. But I do see value in the audience and crowdsourced influence happening, and I would recommend that you put out your own reviews and we will aggregate them. They don't have to go on InRange. Post them yourself, and if you share them with me, I'll share them. That's how I want to see reviews about this go. I don't want to send this to somebody whose loyalties may lie somewhere else. Bootstraps. What should Americans know about bringing or borrowing guns in Finland with Finnish brutality? This is a tough one. I haven't even broached this myself. As for borrowing, you better know somebody in Finland that's a friend that's going to be at the match that can help you with that. That's a challenge of its own right. Can't help you with that. Maybe you could reach out to people on Discord or on our Patreon that are Finnish supporters, and maybe you could do something there. In terms of bringing your gun there, it is possible. And we have a friend of the channel, Les, who has been a sponsor from Polaris Logistics, and Polaris Logistics does very much this thing. You can work with him. Of course, it is a service, so it's not free, and they will work with you to get your firearm transported to Finland legally, so you can use it and then get it back. That's what I would recommend. So Les at Polaris Logistics, sponsor of the channel for, well, not a sponsor of the channel, sponsor of Desert Brutality matches. He's been a great guy and a supporter of the channel as well, and that would be my recommendation. Patrick H. What is your preference, Lpvo or red dot? Depends on what I'm trying to do. If I'm out hunting, or if I was going on a hunting expedition, Lpvo, because I want to be able to see and glass and range and zoom into what I'm trying to do. If I'm doing long-range precision work, Lpvo, or a fixed optic, but typically Lpvo. If it's dynamic environment and this is more on the clock, personally, myself, I tend to gravitate to the red dots with a magnifier. I like the fact that there's no eye relief required. There's no eye relief requirements. There's no eye box. There's nothing like that. And you just look through it, and in any odd position, you can always get a sight picture. And as long as your optic is reasonably parallax free, you can make a shot. But we're also talking about shots that are out to 300 yards and in, and Lpvos can push you further than that. So it depends on what you're trying to do. But if you have to push me into a choice between the two, I will go with a red dot. Glenn P. You said in the past, in an old Q&A I believe, that you're not a fan of muzzle brakes on 5.56 rifles since they add relatively little value outside of things like 3-gun. Do you think that still holds true when they're part of a suppressor QD system? No, at that point it doesn't matter. At that point your muzzle brake is nothing more than the device to put your suppressor on. And of course when you put a suppressor on a muzzle brake that happens to be also a QD mount, you've completely mitigated any of the concerns that come with using a muzzle brake. So no, I don't believe that that's an issue with a QD mount muzzle brake whatsoever. Dylan L. Second time asking, M1 Garand without supply issues or an MP44 with only 2 mags? Ammo is plentiful, but you just have 2 mags. I will go with the MP44 with 2 mags. The intermediate cartridge allows you to have quicker, easier follow-up shots, and you have, well, theoretically 30 rounds in each mag, probably 25 when you've downloaded them, but that's 50 rounds on tap with only 1 reload required, meaning switching a mag. Plus you have selective fire if you happen to need it. So between the M1 Garand and the MP44 with only 2 magazines, but ammunition not being an issue, still go with the MP44. 6-gun. Knowing that you're a fan of the Alien universe, what do you think of the newer films like Prometheus and Covenant? Super lukewarm on those. I will say that Alien is amazing. Aliens is even more amazing. Alien 3 Director Cut is really good. Alien Resurrection is garbage. Prometheus is better than Alien Resurrection, and Covenant was better than Prometheus. But that's not saying much. When you compare Prometheus and Covenant to Alien and Aliens, they are a shadow of that, but they are tolerable. That's where I'd go with that. Graves Near. Graves Near. You'll be spending 8 hours in a randomly selected battle within the last 300 years. Could be modern or old. M14 and an aspirin, or an L85A1 and a Red Bull. I'm going to go ahead and go with the M14 again. The more conventional design of a standard rifle is preferable to me, and I'd rather have an aspirin than a Red Bull in general. John W. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Now we're getting to the real important questions, and these are the ones that I really like. This is the kind of stuff where we get to the meats and bones of things that matter, really, right? So let me go there with this. The definition of a sandwich by Webster's is the dictionary is an item of food consisting of 2 pieces of bread with meat, cheese, or other filling between them, eaten as a light meal. By that definition, a hot dog is a sandwich. But a hot dog bun is typically connected. So it's not 2 pieces of bread. If the bread is still connected in the middle, that's 1 piece of bread. So if we're gonna define a hot dog as a sandwich and the bun is still connected at the middle, it is an open-faced sandwich, even if you fold the bun. Now, if you cut the bun in half so that it's a separate piece of bread and you now have a piece of bread and a piece of bread, put it together with the hot dog in the middle, now you have a traditional sandwich that is between 2 pieces of bread. So in that regard, it's a sandwich, but it's more traditionally an open-faced sandwich. But that's not where this ends. If you go to the cube rules of food, and I recommend that you look up the cube rule of food, hot dog is a taco because it's folded around, because it is a piece of bread or a piece of some sort of like a taco, like a tortilla, that is a solid single piece with the filling in the middle. And when it has this shape, per the cube rules of food, it's a taco. So we have to really define if we're going by the standard traditional rules or the cube rules. If we're going with cube rules, hot dog's a taco. If we're going outside of the cube rules, then it is an open-faced sandwich. Unless you do something weird where you accidentally or intentionally cut the bun in half, then it is a sandwich. So a hot dog is a sandwich, open-faced sandwich, or a traditional sandwich, or by modern cube rules, could be considered a taco. Thank you for that question, John W. This is the kind of stuff that matters, right? These are the questions that really, really are important that we get to the bottom of here on InRangeTV, and I want to make sure that I don't give something like that any sort of short shrift. Garrick B. It's 1944. Oh, another question about if or. It's 1944, and you have the option of an STG-44 or an FG-42. Which is your pick and why? I'm still going with the STG-44 or the MP-44. Intermediate cartridge, higher capacity magazines, easier to fire, possibility for selective fire. FG-42 is a good gun. It's a good design. It's also a fragile design that was pushed into service really without a lot of concern about durability. I'm going with the STG-44 on that one as well. Connor D. You've explained your preferences regarding Winchester lever guns numerous times, but what's your opinion on the Marlin 1894/5 guns? A lot of people ask about the Marlin lever guns, and this is one of those things that's like Ford or Chevy. People get into fights over this, fist fights over Marlin versus Winchester. I'm not going to fight anyone about it, but what I am going to say is I'm not a big fan of the Marlins. The more closed-in action actually means that if a malfunction does occur, it's very hard to mitigate. I've seen this at cowboy action matches where people are running a Marlin, something goes wrong, and they're bringing out their knife and whittling on the gun almost to try and figure out what to do to get this thing fixed. Sometimes you have to take the Marlin completely apart to mitigate a malfunction issue with a Marlin. It is that and that reason specifically that I am not a big fan of the Marlin lever action design. I'm not saying you shouldn't be, but if you told me, I'm not going to go with a Marlin. I'm going to go with the Winchester. It's a simpler, easier action to deal with, easier to mitigate malfunctions, and I don't see what the advantages of the Marlin over the Winchester enough to deal with that potentiality. Travis W. I hope to shoot Desert Brutality 2021. Man, I hope we have Desert Brutality 2021 given the world we're in right now. I'm not saying we're not going to have something like that. Plans are to have something like that, but right now we're going through a third wave coronavirus. Yeah. But twice in manual and in armored. I'm assuming you mean you're going to shoot once in manual, once in armored to shoot twice. I'm assuming you don't mean you want to shoot manual twice, armored twice to shoot 4 times. Do you know yet if it's going to be set up in such a way that I'd be able to do that this year? If you're willing to pay for more than 1 slot, you can occupy more than 1 slot. So is that something you can do? Yeah. If you want to shoot the match twice and you want to register once in manual and once in armored, that's something you can do. Don't know that I'd recommend it, but it's certainly something you could do, sure. I need a cool nickname. Maybe you don't. That's a pretty cool nickname in and of itself. Did you guys get any more precision rifle content made over the lockdown, as you may have had more time to dedicate it that wasn't there previously? If you're talking about the precision rifle project that I started with Ian years ago, no. Ian's schedule with Forgotten Weapons has become obscene, in my opinion. I don't know how he does it, and I don't know that I would want to live the life that he's living. He is traveling, seems like, most of the time, and the ability to do something like a dedicated precision rifle content series, at least together, is essentially close to zero. Is there going to be more precision rifle content coming to the channel? Yes, I do have a Desert Tech SRS A2 bullpup bolt action rifle I'm doing some work with. It's been slow because I'm waiting to get some optics on it, and I didn't have the appropriate optic for it. So will there be more precision rifle content coming? There'll be some stuff coming, but it won't be a continuation of that original project, if that's what you're referring to. That project that we launched there and did, what, 2 videos on? Consider that one dead. Sorry. Chad S. How often do out-of-staters, especially from California, attend 2-gun action challenge match? Is it mostly locals? It is mostly locals, but we have had people historically travel from all over the country to come shoot matches. So it'd be really weird on a regular, just a standard month. We might have someone from Canada. We've had people from Europe. We've had people from Australia. We've had people from California with actually some regularity. All over the place come down to shoot the 2-gun action challenge match. There are more than one 2-gun action challenge matches. There's the one that I run, which is near Tucson. And there are now what we're calling the in-range road shows, which are quarterly up in Chino Valley, Arizona. And then Paul runs a match that is also a 2-gun action challenge match up in Phoenix, not related to me directly, but he's using the 2-gun action challenge match rule set. And this brings up an interesting thing that happened, which you didn't know you were asking about. This last weekend at the 2-gun action challenge match up in Phoenix, which is not run the way I run it. I run my matches with mask mandates and reduced attendance. They haven't done that to the same degree up at the Phoenix match. In fact, I don't think they have a mask mandate. Turns out that someone showed up to the match, shot on squad 2, I think it was, and did that while they had 103-degree fever and turned out to be COVID positive. So I'm at the point now where anything that inspires or encourages someone during the pandemic to travel long distance. Oh, by the way, and they came from Washington, I think, to shoot the match. So they drove across the country to shoot this match up in Phoenix. Fan of the channel. Thank you for being a fan. But shot the match while knowingly having 103-degree fever, and then finding out subsequently, after they went to the emergency room after the match, that they had COVID. That puts everyone at risk, obviously, as does traveling across the country, obviously. And so at this point, I'm at a point now where I'm obviously heavily considering that until this is done, whatever this is, not running events that encourage anyone to come from out of state or to travel long distances to shoot the match. I don't know what that means yet. I'm going to figure that out. And I know some of you are in the 2-Gun Army supporter group. I'm not trying to marginalize your support. Maybe we have to figure out something else for you, or just continue your support, and we'll get there when this COVID thing is over. But at this point, the fact that a standard monthly match encouraged someone to drive across the country and shoot the match while they knew how they had a fever, turning out to be COVID positive, is something that really makes me pause. Even with mask mandates, if the match is encouraging people to do that, I don't want to be the person that encourages them to do that. I hope that makes sense. But does it happen? Yes. When we're back to normal, will it happen again? I'm sure it will. Jeremy the Head Fox. What's the worst gun you've ever purchased, and why is it the S333 Thunderstruck revolver? And the answer is, that is the worst gun I've ever purchased. The S333 Thunderstruck, while being conceptually interesting, turns out to tumble bullets and to be run by a company that does not even contact me when I ask them for support and repair on my gun that does not stabilize bullets out of the left barrel. So, considering they didn't even bother to reply to my multiple forms of contact, and I have heard now from not just myself, of course, but many people who own these that theirs are doing the same thing, I'm going to go ahead and say that the S333 is the worst gun I've ever purchased, and I will not sell it to anyone because it is broken in that it doesn't stabilize rounds at a couple yards, and it is now just an albatross that I get to own. Thank you, STD Manufacturing. Real proud of you. Autism Gaming. Is there possibly that you guys will be doing a 308 or larger caliber lower for your What Would Stoner Do 2020 in the future? Anything's possible. I wouldn't want to say no, because then if we do it or do something like that someday, you're going to be like, remember when you said you weren't going to do that? But is that on the radar? Nope. Is it planned? Nope. Do we think we're going to do it? Nope. What we got to get through right now is get the What Would Stoner Do 2020 out there and make that a fantastic product and do the things that come with it that we should do with the What Would Stoner Do project anyway. Talk about optics, blah, 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 blah. Will we ever be doing a larger caliber version of this? I don't know if ever is no. Is that something you I think's going to happen? No. George P. What advantage does a Piston M416 have over the standard AR-15 DI system? Piston systems are better for very short barrels because of the gas impulse, and they do keep the action cleaner, particularly when you're using suppression. So if you really need to use suppression or suppression on a short barrel, the M416, the HK416 is a better choice as a piston. Other than that, I see no advantage. In fact, I see disadvantages. Rebecca F. What is the most irritating gun you've ever had the misfortune of having to use for a period of time, like a match or a trip? Two come to mind. There was one where I went up to shoot the 2-gun match up in Phoenix. Actually, I mentioned that here. And I was provided a loaner AK that had a broken fire control group in it that pretty much failed to fire almost every time I pulled the trigger. That was pretty damn frustrating. And then long, long ago in range history, I shot a match with a semi-automatic BAR. And that was what taught me how much I don't like the BAR. Kenton M. How much cleaning does a modern cartridge firearm, in my case a lever action and revolver chambered in .357 Magnum, require if using black powder? All the same requirements that a historic firearm require using black powder. Now, maybe some of your guns have chrome line bores or something. I don't know. It's possible. That will help a little bit. But the reality is black powder, when fired, causes corrosive salts to deposit amongst your firearm. If you do not clean black powder corrosive salts as a result of firing it, you will have a destroyed, rusted barrel and gun, regardless of if it's modern or not. So if you're going to use black powder, get out your water and your ballistol and clean that thing. Ryan, Galil Ace in 5.56 or SLR 106 in 5.56, and why? Well, you know, this is a purist versus non-purist question. If you're coming at it from the perspective of what's the nicer gun to handle and fire, they're both great. But if you made me choose between the Galil Ace in 5.56 or the SLR 106 in 5.56, I'm going to go with the Galil Ace. There are a lot of modern improvements, abilities to mount optics, etc., better sights, things that happen with the Galil Ace series that the SLR 106 is still, you know, dated on. So between the two, I'd go with the Galil Ace. Jeff K. What bad habits can competition actually induce, or is this a myth? No, it's not a myth. If you shoot only competition and you never do anything about training and make sure that you have a mindset shift between this is competition and this is training, you could learn things in competition that you probably don't want to bring to the real world, like not using cover and concealment would be an example, because that can't really be enforced in a match. And in the real world, of course, that's incredibly important. There are times where you may want to retain your magazines in the real world, and there's times where you may not want to retain your magazines in the real world. So are there things that can happen in competition? A target identification. You can't just shoot everything in the real world that you see that might be scary to you, right? So is that possible that you could induce bad habits from competition? Yes. But if competition is done well, which sadly I don't think a lot of it is, it will provide a more mentally pliable environment that requires you to use your mental capabilities as well as your shooting capabilities on the clock, which should help keep your mental plasticity for when you're doing or worried about real world events. But if you don't augment your competition environment with training, where you can do things like cover and concealment or dynamic things we can't do in competition, there is a risk of picking up some bad habits. Yeah, sure. Larry H., what do you enjoy about the Arizona desert? I like the wilderness and the wild wastelands of the desert. And it's not just the Arizona desert. I really love New Mexico as well, and Utah and all of that area. There is a certain sense of freedom that comes with living out here. When you see what's behind me, which is really nothing, you can be anything you want to be, and you can pretty much do what you want to do. Now, I would say that, of course, morality and respect for other humans applies, but like to go out to the local hill, and as long as I'm a quarter mile from a road or occupied structure to go shooting with a good backstop, it's something I can just do. If I see a trail, I can just go on it. If I want to know where that goes, I can find out where that goes. If I want to be out in a place where I don't see a human being or hear a human being or have to worry about all the things that come with urbanized environments, I can do that here too. Plus, there is something about the wild of the desert and the fact that it is a hostile environment to us that I find really appealing. It reminds you of your place in the world, and the fact that if you treat this environment without respect, you will find yourself in trouble, and you may not make it out of this environment depending on what you're doing. So, in my opinion, all of those things are good things, and I find it to be beautiful. Haley P. You mentioned the severity of black powder fouling. With that in mind, can it render a weapon combat ineffective and in so many shots? Yes, black powder fouling can render a gun ineffective. It can eventually get to the point where the action will no longer cycle. You can see that with something that's a repeater, like a Henry or a 66 or a 73, but it takes quite a while for that to get there, and the reality is you can merely spit or pour water in the gun and it will continue to function. Your barrel can get fouled to the point, especially if you're not using sufficient lubrication, where your accuracy will degrade to the point where it's no longer viable to hit what you're aiming at. The answer for how many shots is completely dependent on the gun, the system, the mechanism, the lubricity, the lube you're using in the bullets, etc. So I can't answer that here. It would depend on the gun and what you're doing. But is it possible that that happens? It's not just possible, it does happen. But it's also really good to remember that black powder fouling and such can be dealt with just water. Brenton G. Do you think 545 will show signs of growth now that Hornaday is making better components? I do not. 545 does not bring enough advantage or any sort of really perceivable advantage to the table over 556 to a degree that it means that 545 will have a reason to exist in the American market above and beyond the already existent 556. 545 will always be a niche thing in this country. Brett T. Second try. Does a 6 o'clock hold /0 have merit or value in combat /two-gun applications? Well, you're going to get subjective answers about this. And you're going to hear people that are going to say both to you, right? I believe it has merit across the board. The reality is the idea of a belt buckle hold means that you have a little bit less precision of having a precise shot on something small, but you also have the ability to take snapshots and be more precise when something is able to be aimed at. I don't know how else to describe that. So depending on what your zero is, I like the idea of this. Let's say something is a small target and you're using iron sights. Now, remember, 6 o'clock hold is an iron sight thing. It is not something you do with optics. Iron sight thing. And it's small enough you can perceive it and see it. If you bring up your iron sight, especially on a combat rifle, the front sight's big enough that it's going to obliterate the entire target. If you aim and have a 6 o'clock hold and aim just below it, even if it's a headshot, guess what? You're aiming here. You can still perceive and focus on the front sight in relation to what you're aiming at. And that even will apply if your front sight post is thick, like on a combat or military rifle. So does a 6 o'clock hold have an advantage in combat or two-gun applications? Personally, I think it does. Now, have I shot a 6 o'clock hold in combat? No, I haven't. But have I shot in dynamic environments with a 6 o'clock hold? Yes. But I shoot precision rifle across the board, across the course with a 6 o'clock hold? Yes. Are the reasons for why a 6 o'clock hold will work in that environment, should they be applicable to hunting and or combat? Yes. Ben N. Binary triggers. You're on the record as not liking them. Do you see any hope that with time they will become more reliable? Nope. They're just a niche fun thing at best. And the reality is there's nothing you need to do with a binary trigger that you can't do with an excellent single stage or two stage low trigger, like match trigger. You put an SLT 1 or 2 in your gun, you can have a fire rate similar to that of a binary trigger, but yet you control every time you pull the trigger versus this weird wonky thing that causes malfunctions. So if you want to play with them, I'm not saying don't enjoy it if you have fun with it. I've never had one that freaking worked worth a damn, but the reality is I don't see any advantage to them whatsoever over just putting an SLT1 or some sort of match trigger in your gun. Chance H, second time asking. Thoughts on a 5.56 PMAG fed lever gun? Why? If you live in an environment that's prohibitive, maybe there's something there. If you live in a place where you can't have a semi-automatic, then maybe there's a thing there. But the reality is 5.56 and PMAGs go into black rifles. And if you can get a black rifle, why in the world would you want a lever gun in 5.56? I don't see it, personally. Wayne I. Tombstone, Arizona Territory. I like that you got Arizona Territory right. Fall of 1881. Which revolver do you ride into town with? A Colt single-action army, a Remington 1875 single-action army, a Smith & Wesson Model 3, or your 1862 Colt Police, or something else? My druthers at that time would still be the Schofield. The Schofield, as far as I'm concerned, is the most combat-effective revolver of its time. It is reliable if you have the right ammunition and know what you're doing with it. Very quick and easy to reload, and provides all the things that you can get out of a single-action army, but with all the advantages of what's really a modern revolver. So if you had me to pick, it would not be the single-action army, it would not be the Remington, it would not be the 62 Colt, it would be a Schofield. When it comes to the single-action army, though, I find it very interesting that for myself personally, if I was going to go with a Colt-type revolver, I actually prefer the 1871 open top to the single-action army, just for balance. But if I'm going to carry one revolver, back in that period of time, in 1881, if I could, I would have a Schofield. Pluto's Cosmonaut. Second time asking, what, if anything, do you think of the Phoenix Lights? For those of you that are not aware, Phoenix Lights was a UFO sighting that happened up near Phoenix, and it's been controversial to this day. I don't think anything of them. I think they were probably some military thingamajig or some practice or drill or exercise that went on that has, of course, been turned into a UFO sighting. These are things that I don't think much of, and people get really round up on them, but it's a good question. Ryan H., are you a rabies guy or a Too Dark Park guy? So those of you that don't know what that means, these are references to one of my favorite bands of all time, Skinny Puppy, Industrial Act, and two of their most quintessential albums are Rabies and Too Dark Park. And I'm going to give you an answer you don't like, which is I will not choose between those two. That's like choosing between your children, which one you love more. Those are both incredible albums, and I will not pick one over the other. Norman H., if you could snap your fingers, change one thing about the firearms industry, what would it be? I would get rid of the toxic, derp, nonsense advertising that completely targets one demographic versus the entire reality of what is the firearms owning base. People, a lot of the industry thinks that everyone's a Punisher skull 3%er thing. And yeah, there's a lot of those folks. And if your marketing is to specifically target only one part of the world that you could be selling firearms to, yes, you're doing it. But the reality is that is not the entire firearms community, and I would like to see the firearms industry as a whole be more inclusive and get rid of this idea that it's a monolithic culture. Adam S., what degree of precision is needed for a carbine with a 1-4 optic to be used on game or man-sized targets from a field expedient shooting position? It's going to be a controversial question and a controversial answer. I think the minimum, meaning the combined MOA hold for you with the gun, is 4 MOA. If you can keep within 4 MOA with a 1-4 optic, you are viable out to 400 yards, and 400 yards should be about what you're doing with a 4X optic. Typically, your magnification is 1X per 100 yards of distance, and 4 MOA allows you to, at 400 yards, to be hit within a 16-inch circle, which is still enough for reasonable game and a man. So I say 4 MOA. John T., you sometimes get asked about running Flintlocks at a 2-gun match, and your practical answer is that for typical par times, it isn't physically possible to do. However, as the course designer, isn't it possible to just adjust the par time so it'd be possible to run the course? Sure, I could design a match and make it completely specifically designed around what I want to do to run a Flintlock at it. First of all, I'll be the only one doing that. No one's going to be there to do that. No one's going to join me on such an endeavor. But additionally, it's going to ruin the match for everyone else there with a modern gun. So they're going to sit there and have these weird stage designs with lower round count, lower target presentations, and a much greater par time so I can have fun shooting a Flintlock. It comes at the deprecation and damage to the match as a whole. It's not fair. What's more interesting is just to see how close I can get with a Flintlock, which will be, of course, not onto the par times we're providing. So I do not want to design a match specifically around my particular peculiarity for that month and then hurt it or harm the match for everyone else attending. Andrew M., what happened to the series you're doing on the U.S. Civil War cavalry carbines? What happened is it's still happening. Yes, InRange is slow. Stuff comes out when it comes out. Motivation and artistic endeavors are part of this, and motivation is part of it. I have a lot of content filmed already for the U.S. Civil War cavalry carbine project, and you will, over time, it will dribble out, just like other black powder, other things are dribbling out. Like, stuff that I said was going to happen a year ago sometimes happens a year later. I am still working on that project, and you will still see content on it. Duke von Meep II. Best first-time black powder rifle. That's a tough one, man, because are you looking for history? Are you looking for modern? Do you just want to shoot black powder because you're shooting black powder? I mean, the modern ones are much easier to use with inline ignition and such than the historic ones. But if you're looking for historical purposes, lower cost, but still you can get the experience of shooting a black powder rifle would be a percussion, like a Hawkins or something like that. You can get those things for around $400. That'd be a good place to start. One of the Hawkins, like 50 or 54 calibers. Matt S. Do you recommend a blunderbuss as a first black powder firearm? No, and the reason I don't is because you can't really get them in a way that I would consider them supportable. First of all, most of them are Flintlocks, and those are another level of challenge above and beyond just percussion caps. So I wouldn't recommend them as a first. Plus, there's a lot of peculiarities to loading smoothbores depending on what you want to do. You're going to shoot a round ball, or you're going to shoot patched round ball, or you're going to shoot shot loads. All the things that you can do with that, which by the way is awesome. Is that a good first choice because of all the things? You can kind of get lost in the weeds, and I don't think it's a good first choice. Plus, if you saw the video, getting a blunderbuss is a little bit more of a challenge and concern than saying going to pick up, like I just said a second ago, like a 50 caliber Hawkins percussion thing for $400. So I don't think it's a good first choice, no. Canis Latrons. Looking into getting into shooting Old West guns. I hear that the 4440 was a good cartridge for the 1873 due to the thin walls of the brass seal in the chamber. Would gas seal problems come up when shooting an 1873 with modern 45 Colt ammunition? Well, first of all, if you're using smokeless ammunition, none of that applies. The kind of black powder fouling that happens with black powder isn't going to be happening with modern ammunition. So if you're getting a modern 73 and shooting smokeless, none of that applies at all. Now, I have found, and I know this is controversial too, that you do not need the sealing properties of the 4440 to keep fouling out of your 1873 action if you load your 45 Colt to high enough pressures, meaning you don't download it too much, and you get a good crimp. That kind of causes the combustion to happen in a way that the cartridge mostly seals the chamber and sends the round down range, the projectile, without fouling, getting back into the action. Plus, if it does start to foul, it really happens after a lot of rounds, especially in a good quality 73 with properly loaded black powder cartridges, that you'll find that it's not a big deal to even just wipe it off if you needed to. So, is the 4440 better for this? Yes. Do you need a 4440? No. And if you're going to use smokeless, irrelevant. Carl F. Any chance we'll see a video on Desert Tech's improved MDR-X? Maybe, but I would need to get one. I have an MDR. I have done some content about the MDR in 6.5 Creedmoor. I do not have access to an MDR-X. I would have to buy one, or they'd have to send me one. So maybe someday I'll have an MDR-X in my possession and I will do content on an MDR-X, but I do not have one currently in my grasp to do that. So the answer to that is maybe. That's all the questions for this month. I want to remind everyone here that this is all Patreon supported. Everyone here is a Patreon supporter. And I want to thank you legitimately, truly, for keeping InRange alive. And not only that, creating a community around it and being able to support something that is a different voice in the firearms community. Very much appreciated, and sincerely thank all of you. And I'm sorry if I didn't get to one of your questions this month that you submitted. If I didn't, do what some of these folks did here, and next month submit it again, saying second time asking, third time asking, and I will do my best to get to them. I hope everyone here, whether you're a Patreon supporter or just a viewer, and I don't mean just a viewer because that matters too, but if you're a viewer, have enjoyed this. Some really interesting questions this month, and I'm glad to have them. If you can consider supporting us on Patreon, please do. We have a Discord, we have perks, we have things that come with that. It does have a community around it, and it's really great to have you. If you can't, I do understand that as well. Just subscribe to one of the multiple distribution points. You can find InRange isn't just on YouTube. In fact, there's content being produced now that is not going on YouTube. It's going on Vimeo and BitChute, etc. You can find them all at inrange.tv/watch. Thanks, and share with your friends.